joining this very wonderful session this afternoon. I hope you are doing well and hope you're having a blessed afternoon. Uh, and I hope you're settled in now for our session, which is about to kick off in about 1 minute. I'm going to give you each 30 seconds to settle in and get to share that link with a friend that you know may be interested in this session. My name is Gabriel Achaye, and I'm speaking to you live from the East Africa Law Society house here in Arusha, Tanzania. And we extend a very warm welcome to you, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished legal professionals and esteemed members of the regional bar. Very warm welcome to our webinar on AI and the law. And this is not just any webinar. This is a very, very special webinar because we have the host here and we are ready to kick off now with our session. I have my panel here. I have our moderator in the house. So I'm thrilled to have you join us today for this timely and transformative training, which is designed to equip you with the legal knowledge and tools to navigate the dynamic intersection between artificial intelligence and legal practice. Now, colleagues, as we embark on today's journey to explore AI applications, ethical implications, regulatory frameworks, and future trends in the profession, we are committed in engaging an insightful experience. So this webinar is a very vital step in our mission to provide continuous professional development and empower you to stay ahead in an ever-evolving legal field. In a very special way, I'd like to thank our partners from Microsoft for making this happen. This wouldn't have happened without Microsoft input. And so we are very grateful that you took off time in your very busy schedules to come and have a candid conversation with these legal practitioners about AI and the law. So it's now my great pleasure to introduce our esteemed moderator and friend, Mr. Terry Kahuma. Mr. Terry Kahuma is indeed a man of all seasons. He's an advocate of the High Court of Uganda. He's the CEO and the host of his social media platform called Simply Legal by Terry Kahuma, where he gives daily legal advice and insights about the law. On Simply Legal, Counsel Kahuma boasts of two attractive segments, which are legal tips, where he gives daily legal advice on how to navigate through life's challenges, and legal news daily, where he gives a breakdown of news and worldly challenges that are happening on a daily. So if you have not yet subscribed to Mr. Terry Kahuma's channel, please do. I listen to him almost every time he has a new update. So Terry is also the CEO of his own legal app called Fameron, which connects people and lawyers together, offering a multitude of legal services, which makes access to legal services easier to the everyday person. So Terry, you will guide us through today's discussion with your expertise and enthusiasm in AI and the law. And I will now hand it over to you for the next 2 hours to guide our esteemed panel through this very engaging conversation. Please joining this call, please note that we are streaming live on YouTube and on Zoom. So please get to share those links. Let's get to tweet about this session and spread the word around that we're having this conversation. Harry, over to you now.
Okay, thank you so much, Gabriel. That was a very, very fantastic introduction and a layout of exactly what we're going to discuss, especially with the ever-growing trends all over the globe, which is now artificial intelligence. And wow, I don't know, I'm short of words for the way Gabriel has introduced me. Thank you so much. I don't think I need any further introduction, but the important people with us right now are the team from Microsoft, and they have taken off their time to come and give us their well of not only legal knowledge, but also artificial intelligence and how we can govern it in today's ever-growing trends and in today's time. Now I'll go straight to the point. With us, the people from Microsoft, our esteemed guests, we are going to have a layout of people who are going to start, or I'm going to briefly give introductions of them, and they'll also introduce themselves, but I'm going to state who will come first, who will come second, and then what they will also be discussing for us. So the first panelist we will be having will be Otilia Firi. I think she will forgive me for the pronunciation, but it's Otilia Firi, and she is the Principal Corporate Counsel, Microsoft Africa. And Otilia will be discussing for us the introduction to artificial intelligence and Microsoft's responsible artificial intelligence approach. And then shortly after Otilia, we will also be having Malcolm Kijira. Malcolm is holding the office currently of Government Affairs Manager. That's the Kenya branch, I think, of Microsoft, if I'm not mistaken. And Malcolm will be discussing for us the overview of regulatory developments in Kenya, including his highlights from the newly launched Kenya Artificial Intelligence Strategy. Following from Malcolm, we will also have a segment where we'll be having Akua Gieke or Jeke. Really, forgive me for the pronunciations, but we'll be having Akua Gieke, who will be taking us through who will be taking us through creating and enabling policies and regulatory environment to harness the artificial intelligence opportunities in Africa. With key takeaways from the Global Artificial Intelligence Summit on Artificial Intelligence in Africa. And Akua holds the Office of Government Affairs Director in Microsoft. Then we'll also be having Veronica Osanya, who is also working in Microsoft, and Veronica will be discussing for us the topic of a day in the life of an AI practitioner or an AI professional. So her major topic that she'll be talking to us about will be how legal and government affairs professionals are leveraging generative artificial intelligence in the ever-growing world. And then lastly, I was informed by Gabriel we have one more entrant. Gabriel, could you just remind me of the name of that entrant? I think that will be coming after Veronica. There's someone else who will be coming after Veronica. She asked to come onto the segment after Veronica. Let me see, okay. Okay, I think that will be our panelists until you just allow me to get the name of the last person who will be coming after Veronica. But as of now, that will be the layout of the panelists who will be taking us through today's session. Yes, so handing over to you, Otilia. Otilia, you'll be taking us through the first segment.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Terry and Gabriel, and we're really thankful to the East Africa Law Society for the opportunity to come and engage you all. This is something that is close to our hearts. It is our day-to-day work, and when we get opportunities like this to share with others, it's also an opportunity for us to sharpen ourselves. And so we're really looking forward to the discussion and to the questions that will come at the end as well. So as shared, I will start off, I think Terry did a great job of doing an introduction of us, the speakers, and as well the agenda. So I will just jump right into my portion. For my portion of the segment, I was hoping just to level set, to help give an understanding of what is this thing we call artificial intelligence. How have we ended up where we are here with all this excitement around what it can do and how it can revolutionize the way that we work. And then I will go into sharing as well what Microsoft's journey has been in this space, and what we're calling our responsible AI approach. If I could ask if we could play the video. I'm a commercial lawyer, and so it is it would be impossible for me to start without a video that actually shows you what is the thing that we're talking about that we have from a Microsoft perspective that we are championing in this AI space. And so I did want to share with you our special co-pilot. There we go. What we call our everyday companion. I'm not sure if the volume is. Oh, it appears. I promise that this video is typically a lot more fun when it has the music, because it has a really cool Makeba, Makebella, if you've ever heard it. Anyhow, thank you for sharing that. If we can move maybe to the next slide, and I can walk us through what have been the developments that has led us here. So I thought I would start off with, when we think of artificial intelligence, really, what is it, right? It is the ability for compute systems to mimic human intelligence. And there's different components to this, right? There is vision, speech, the ability to read, language. And if we look over the years, there've been artificial intelligence has been around with us for a very long time, and in different aspects, and we've probably been interacting with it in certain ways. So if we think about vision recognition, for example. Thank you. Because remember, you're sharing, Veronica, and you're now in your chat. Sorry, Veronica. Perhaps if it's easier, if you stop sharing on your end, I can share from this end.
Can you stop sharing?
Yeah. Let me share the presentation from my end. All right. Superb. All right. All right. So I was trying to explain that there are different facets when we think about artificial intelligence, right? We said it's like the computer's ability to mimic human intelligence. And this could take various forms: vision, speech recognition, reading, translation, language understanding. And we've seen artificial intelligence tools become better at reaching human parity in these different elements over time. So if we take vision, for example, think about this as the ability for a computer to recognize an object, and we think of facial recognition technology. If we think of how it's used in multi-factor authentication, for example, if you have certain iPhone or other related phone devices, you might be able to use your face to access your device. And that is really just the ability for the phone to recognize your face, which is that vision recognition that we're talking about. Speech recognition, I think many of us are now used to these assistants, whether it's Alexa, Siri, and others, who have the ability to hear, understand speech, and then respond. And I think those developments we have seen already incorporated into technologies that they're familiar with. In the legal space, this idea around reading, I think, is one that those who work in due diligence, for example, where there's large amounts of sets of documentation that need to be processed, and read through, I think we've seen a lot of due diligence related tools in that space because of this development and the ability for computers to read content. Translation, I think similarly, for many of you who are engaged, whether it's in the legal processes and court processes, we've seen translation services become available for some court processes that have been using tools like Zoom and or Teams. These translation capabilities have been readily available over time. But what happened recently that's really kind of changing the pace of innovation and the adoption of technology in this space is language understanding, the ability for computers to understand language. And this happened in about the 2019 timeframe and has led to the creation of tools like ChatGPT and many others, these generative AI tools that we talk about today. And this is really the thing that I think is making AI become more accessible because it can be used by anyone in any context for as long as they have access to a device and to internet capabilities. And so I think it's really changing the way that we work. But if we take a step back and ask, okay, what is artificial intelligence really? The simplest definition I could find is that artificial intelligence helps to solve tasks that require human intelligence. That's the simplest way that I could think about it. It's not a replacement for human intelligence, but it's something that can help you solve tasks in the way that a human also could be able to. In certain areas, like we shared in the previous slide, we've reached human parity. But to be fair, it's not that AI is able to do everything that a human is able to do. And that's why you hear when people speak of these products, and even as in the video that we were trying to play earlier, we call our product Copilot because there's this idea that we realize that it is a tool that can help human ingenuity, not necessarily replace it. And it should be thought of really in this way. Something that can help us in some of the tasks that we typically do as humans. There are different components of artificial intelligence. I think machine learning is probably one of the popular ones that many would be familiar with. Machine learning, and the reason why it's interesting is this ability for it to solve specific tasks, learning from data by making certain predictions, which is why you see that they use a lot of machine learning in the sort of tasks that require risk modeling and or profiling. I think in the banking space, it's been quite popular, the use of machine learning. In the legal space, that example that I gave of due diligence processes and due diligence tools that are available, for example, those, as in some of those leverage machine learning tools. And so coming to the question of what is generative AI? And I thought it's important to speak about this in a broad sense, because sometimes when we speak to folk and you ask, what is AI? For many people, AI is ChatGPT. That's all they've known. That's in the way that they've interacted with it. But it's a lot more broader than this. And to be a little bit cheeky, what we did was ask Copilot, which is our generative AI, one of our generative AI tools, to give us an explanation of what generative AI is. And this is what it came up with. So this is quite cool that the tool itself could define or help us understand what it is and what it does. So generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence that creates new things. It has the ability to create new things like pictures, text, speech, and it does this learning from examples that it has been trained on and that it has seen before. And how does it do that? While it is being trained in its learning stage, it figures out the patterns and the rules that make certain things similar. So, for example, if we were to put in a large language model contracts for leases, for example, and say to this generative AI, it would have, the generative AI encoded rather, the generative AI tool would have the ability to learn that, okay, in a lease agreement, you would have the landlord, the person who owns the property, you'd have a lessee, the person who is leasing the property. You kind of need to have an idea of what it is that they're leasing, the type of space it is, some sort of description of it. You would need to have, some sort of payment term around when payment is required and what periodic payment would look like for that. They might also notice that there could be penalties for delay. There could be some terms in there around how, if there's an issue in the place, who is responsible for what, those sorts of terms. Right? So it would be able to learn over time that these are the sort of things or the patterns that you see in a document of this type. And then you would be able then to program it so that in the future, someone could put in a prompt and say, could you draft for me a lease contract for XYZ? And it would be able to generate that. So essentially, that's what generative AI is. And what makes it cool is that it has the ability to create new things. So in the past, for example, when we're talking about facial recognition, it's really just recognizing something that is there. Or if we're talking about the ability to read, it's just really reading and processing something that is there. If we're thinking about all the other, even the speech recognition, for example, right? Just a call and a release. It's not necessarily the ability to create new things. And I think what makes generative AI so powerful is this fact that it is able to make new things. And I think that's where the conversations around some of the risks come in, but we'll get into those shortly. Before we get into some of our discussions around the regulatory topics around, the risk of using these sort of tools and how we should be thinking about governing this, we thought it would be worthwhile to share, as a technology developer, what have we been doing in this space, to kind of give you a look in the back end of how technology developers, or those who are developing AI tools, the journey that we've been on. So around about 2017, we established what's called an Ether committee. The idea then was we were starting to see growing adoption of artificial intelligence tools. And there was a recognition that we want to sell these tools, but we'll also want to be sure that they will be used in ways that don't have detrimental impact for the societies we're trying to serve. We recognize that there were certain high-risk use cases. If you think about it, for example, in healthcare, if you're leveraging artificial intelligence in healthcare and these tools have the ability to have health outcomes that can be a matter of life or death, you really want to have certain guidance around how that is done. And so in recognizing the responsibility that we had in the space, we developed a committee that would help us assess in which instances we felt as a company we should be selling these technologies. So governing around, okay, there's some use cases we will never sell our tools for the purpose of X. And then in addition to that, starting to think through, okay, so if we are developing these tools, how should we be thinking about them? And in 2018 is when we developed what we call our AI principles. And in the next slide, I'll kind of walk you through what those principles are. And as we also get into the regulatory session, you'll also then start to see how those principles are actually some of the founding principles on which regulation is being developed. My apologies for the phone, trying to put that on silent. And so in 2018, we adopted particular facial recognition principles. And part of the context in that is there was a recognition that facial recognition is a tool which can be used for good. Like we said, multi-factor authentication when you're using a banking service, great. But when it's used for surveillance, for example, I think we had in that era of COVID, if you remember, there was concerns in some countries around how facial recognition tools had the ability to be used for surveillance and social scoring that other countries were considering. This is part of the reason why we started to develop those facial recognition tools. And then in 2019, probably one of the most momentous things happened is that we actually established what's called the Office of Responsible AI. And this was the idea that, okay, this is no longer something that is the purview of either just IT or just the purview of our board of directors who set the strategy for the company, or the CEO and the executive who think about what the company should be doing, but more so that it is now something that we need to operationalize within our company. And so they created a center of responsibility essentially for how we develop AI, our policy engagements around AI, and I'll speak to that as well in the next slide, just who they are and what they do. And then in 2019, because now at this point we have principles that we've adopted, we've got an office that's responsible for this work. And then the question was, okay, how do we ensure that we can operationalize this across our organization, bring it to life? And so that's when we developed the Responsible AI Standard. And there's been iterations of this Responsible AI Standard. I think the most recent version is a 2022 version. And there have been other developments that had happened, but these are probably some of the key to speak to. So maybe just drilling down a little bit on some of those points that I spoke to on our journey. The first around creating this Office of Responsible AI. One of the things that was recognized, I think, is that we needed to have a multidisciplinary approach around how we govern and coordinate the development of AI and how we bring this to market, and even how we as a company consume AI ourselves. And this brought together people from engineering, those who are actually building the tools, who actually understand what these tools can or can't do. It brought together those in research who were thinking, okay, how can you use these tools? What are some of the areas, particularly that support fundamental rights, that we can be bringing these solutions to? And then the other bucket, which is where a lot of our teams, including our government affairs colleagues, would chime in and provide a perspective into, is this policy area, where what is the sort of policy that is required to govern artificial intelligence, and really developing, a center of excellence within our company for this. So that's the first bucket around the Office of Responsible AI. The second that I spoke about, if you recall, was the responsible AI principles. And some of these will seem very intuitive to you, right? Some of the concerns that you'll hear people speak about when it comes to artificial intelligence are, when you're training these tools, the data that it is trained on, whose data is it? And is it reflective of an equitable society? Is it fair? And so that's why fairness was one of our principles, as well as inclusiveness, making sure that the data is something that doesn't exacerbate existing injustices that we have in society, but that is fair and equitable and includes everyone's perspective. The other was around reliability and safety. If you think of that healthcare example that I provided, and I think of as well in the automotive space, where we were seeing a lot of artificial intelligence, particularly in self-driving vehicles, for example, safety then becomes really a core component in this, because if these tools are being used in areas where they have where it becomes matters of life and death, then you do need to have safety standards that go beyond traditional standards you might have had for technology. The other is privacy and security. And as we've seen in our regions, there's been the development of data protection and cybersecurity regulation really taking up speed in the last decade. And I think most of the countries in East Africa, for sure, between Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, they all have some form of data protection or cybersecurity regulation in place. And then the other two principles were transparency. And the idea here is we need to be able to explain what are these things doing. And you'll hear a little bit more as well as my colleagues present in their segments. And then the last bit is on accountability. It's the idea that if these tools are able to do things or to solve for tasks that humans are otherwise able to do, then exactly who is responsible if something bad happens. The greatest or easiest examples we've heard are in the context of the automotive space, right? You have a self-driving car. It makes a miscalculation, causes an accident, and that injures someone. Who's responsible in that instance? Is it I, the driver, who was there within the car and had the ability to intervene? Is it the person who built the application that the self-driving car is running on? Is it the person who built the car and then integrated this application into here? Who's responsible in those instances, and who should be held accountable? And there's early thinking in the space around how accountability should be governed. And so those are the principles. So these are very aspirational principles, if you think about them, right? And putting them into practice is something that's a little bit difficult. And this is how we got into developing an AI standard that I spoke about earlier, right? The idea is we go from principles, those values that guide how responsible AI should work, and we say, okay, what are the outcomes that we need to be securing? What are the things that we need to be ensuring that this technology can or can't do? I'll give a good example. One of the things we've always had a concern about when we build our technology tools is if people then can use them to disseminate information that has negative consequences within society, either defamatory or that is hate content or things like that, or misinformation. And so, for example, building content filtering tools into our technology is to enable us to be able to manage some of the content that flows within our systems, right? So that's an example, because what are some of the goals that you'll be trying to achieve? And what are the outcomes that you would be trying to secure? And then how do you take those and translate them into business requirements, right? To say, therefore, if we're now building, we need to build with a content filter, and the content filter must be able to do X. And then the tools and practices which then allow us or help us to be able to meet those requirements. So that's essentially what our responsible AI standard does. It kind of translates those principles into business requirements and tools and practices for us as we're developing and disseminating AI into the world. And I will land on this, which is our customer commitments, and part of the reason why we are engaging with the East Africa Law Society in this way. We recognize that this is something that's going to take a whole of society approach if we're going to get the best out of these type of technologies. And so we've created an assurance program. The idea being we want to engage with folk, help them understand what the technology is, help them understand what we're learning on this journey as well. We're also engaging from a policy and regulatory perspective. I won't go into that because my colleagues are going to speak on that, as that's a space that they lead. But as well, we've created some commercial constructs in how we're selling our products that are also helping provide assurances to our customers, even as they're using these products. One of the key areas that has emerged is conversation around copyright. And because these tools are able to create content while leveraging other people's content, the question is then, how can I be sure that I will not be infringing on someone else's intellectual property when I'm using your tools, but also that you're now not also going to use my intellectual property and make that available to others. And so we're making a really strong copyright commitments for those who use our technologies, to say that we will indemnify them, something we've never done in the past. I mean, to provide unlimited indemnities, because we're so sure that the content filtering tools that I spoke about earlier also have the ability to filter out intellectual property that belongs to others, to make sure that we are not then inadvertently making that available to others as well. And so these are some of the developments that are happening in this space. And I will now shift gears and pass on the mic to Malcolm Kijira, our Government Affairs lead, to speak about some of the regulatory developments we've been seeing in Kenya. Malcolm, let me know if you want me to continue presenting.
Yeah, that would be fine, just so that we have continuity, if that's okay for you.
It is.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Otelia. As Otelia said, my name is Malcolm Kijira. I am the Government Affairs lead for Microsoft in Kenya. I've been tasked with speaking about some of the regulatory developments and considerations that we've had in Kenya. Of course, a lot of these considerations are considerations that other emerging countries and all our neighbors here in the East African community are possibly also going through. So we thought it would be a good example to use the current regulatory developments in Kenya to give you sort of an overview of the process we've been taking and will be taking moving forward. Thank you, Tilia. You can just go to the next slide. So I thought I'd perhaps firstly start with just giving some broad regulatory trends that we've seen across the globe. So obviously before the era of generative AI, many regulatory developments were focused on specific AI issues. I mean, obviously there were AI chatbots. AI existed before generative AI, but given it consisted in those particular contexts, most of the legal issues that were being reviewed or assessed were mostly around those specific contexts. So we're looking at things such as privacy or issues around facial recognition technologies, and in that context, perhaps issues around bias, for example. Now, since the advent of generative AI, some governments, particularly those in the more developed markets such as the EU, have begun to pursue regulatory efforts intended to capture AI technologies more broadly or horizontally across domains and deployment scenarios. So in this instance, we are speaking about such regulatory frameworks such as laws. I think we're all aware of frameworks such as the EU AI Act that were recently enacted. In addition, and I think Otelia mentioned that when we were speaking about some sector-specific issues that might arise, some countries and some governments have looked at a more vertical approach when thinking about AI regulations. So that's looking at traditionally regulated vertical areas, so such as critical infrastructure, financial services, and healthcare, and perhaps enacting regulations or policies that address the risk issues in those specific vertical areas or sectors. So those are sector-specific laws that govern any AI risks in those particular sectors. We can just go to the next slide. Thank you, Otelia. And then also in some instances, so for example, in Japan, many governments have instead of developing, for example, what I earlier flagged as a novel AI framework or law across the board, many of them have looked at their existing laws and have decided to build on them to address any gaps that may be warranted. So Otilia harked and mentioned about IP. So looking at the IP laws and seeing what they can build on, looking at data privacy laws where there's a nexus or cross-section with AI, developing those, thinking about cybersecurity laws and amending those laws. Of course, it's a quicker and easier to and perhaps a more agile way to look at things. So some governments have taken that approach. And in addition, I think one of the other ways the governments have been looking at particular ways of regulating things are in specific areas or issues of concern. Otilia mentioned self-driving cars. Synthetic media is another one. So when we're talking about deep fakes, where now governments are looking for laws around disclosure or provenance. So there are also specific areas of risk or perhaps military use of AI in drones where governments are looking at those specific context-related issues and developing policies, laws, or regulatory frameworks around those. So that's just a broad sort of overview of some of the approaches that many governments across the globe are taking. So why regulate? If you ask me that as a lawyer off the top of my mind, I'll quickly jump and say, well, it's mostly to mitigate risk and to build public trust. But in addition to that, given the AI space that we're speaking about, there's some other issues that governments are looking at. I've touched on those. So alignment with human rights. So aligning these technology with human rights and constitutional values of our various countries. I mentioned data protection and human dignity. So frameworks that aim to protect citizens' data and dignity while fostering an environment for responsible AI innovation. Economic development, this is a big one, and we'll be talking about that as we move. And this is, I think, a huge consideration for a lot of African countries. We always talk, in any conversation we always talk about how can we use AI to leapfrog or jumpstart our economies. So a lot of frameworks are being designed to fuel economic development. So this is by encouraging innovation and ensuring safe integration of AI technologies. And this is sort of the age-old argument of, if we regulate, are we going to stifle innovation, or are we regulating to catalyze innovation? So that's one of the things that you find a lot of government sort of grappling with. And then, as I mentioned, the first thing when I thought of that as a lawyer is mitigating risks. So effective regulation is crucial for mitigating risks and maximizing the benefits of AI. There's a lot of fear around AI, whether justified or not, and in many senses, sensible regulation can build public trust through mitigating risk. Thank you, Otilia. So, as I said earlier when we started, I wanted to use Kenya as an example. There are lots of other countries that have developed the same sort of framework, and this is in a sense I'll be speaking about our AI strategy. Rwanda did this way before Kenya. Our AI strategy was just launched a few weeks ago, and I had the honor of being part of the working group that developed that. So we thought it would be useful if I just sort of give you some background into the considerations we took as a working group and as all the stakeholders in sort of developing the framework or the starting point that Kenya has used for developing its AI frameworks moving forward. So I think one of the first things in discussing what we wanted to do was we were looking at what is the value proposition. Do we want to regulate for the sake of regulations? What type of regulation do we want? And in Kenya, we sort of started by first highlighting what's the value proposition? What do we want? And part of that was, I think I said, driving economic growth. We wanted to elevate the local competitiveness. We kept asking ourselves these questions. Does Kenya want to be a consumer of AI applications or a producer of AI applications? I mentioned establishing robust data governance. That was another question we were consistently asking ourselves. Ensuring agile AI governance, building public trust, as I mentioned, and also, of course, creating sort of a social impact. And in doing all of that, one of the first things we did was look at the AI readiness of Kenya. And I think we had UNESCO come and present, and a few other organizations that have actually done studies around the AI readiness of different countries across the globe. And one of the things that we found was not just Kenya, but a lot of our African and emerging markets have very low AI readiness. And I think that was one of the key aspects that drove the approach that we took, because one of the things that we decided is we wanted to develop a framework that will catalyze the foundations or building blocks for developing an AI ecosystem. We need that AI ecosystem to be able to enact any laws to govern it. At the moment, unlike our counterparts in the West, we do not have a very developed AI ecosystem. So these, as you can see on this particular slide, these are some of the issues that we were thinking about in terms of This is what we need to address in any framework that we develop. And these are the challenges that we find in Kenya, and I think these will be replicated across the board in many of our African countries. So one of those was compute and infrastructure. You need a robust digital infrastructure, including high-speed internet connectivity and access to devices. I think you only need to look at the internet penetration rates outside of big cities. You know that we'll have a lot of challenges in those, and that's a very necessary component for building any AI ecosystem. Energy. I think most of you would be aware that if we look at, for example, the data centers that run these AI workloads, they consume a lot of energy. So how can we have a reliable and sustainable energy to actually run these pieces of infrastructure that we are speaking about? Similar to what I said with internet penetration, if you have a look at electricity penetration in Africa, you'll see that in many areas, particularly in rural areas, there are a lot of challenges around that. And for countries like us in Kenya that has, I believe we use 80 to 90% of our renewable energy sources from natural resources, we were discussing, well, how can we take advantage of that in terms of developing these sort of green data centers? And that's one thing I think some of you might be aware that Microsoft and a company called G42 are doing. We're looking to build a green data center here in Kenya that would take advantage of those renewable energy resources that Kenya has. Talent. We need a skilled talent pool. Yes, we have, as you know, we've gone through our Copilot. We spoke about ChatGPT, but there are obviously more in other applications for AI applications. If we don't have a populace, if we don't have professionals that know how to use this, use prompts, that then of course leaves a gap. There will be no market or use for these particular tools. The market is very important. Do we have a market for this? I think one of the key challenges we're having in Africa is actually identifying use cases that we can use to build upon, or even think about, if we're thinking from a regulatory perspective, what are the policy and intervention points for these specific use cases? So are there use cases in health, in sustainability, in you name it? We need to have examples of use cases to be able to create a market for these applications. Innovative financing. This is something a lot of people don't think about. I think in all our countries, most of our businesses are small to medium enterprises. You'll find that, and we had a lot of those when we were having discussions around the strategy. A lot of them do not have access to funding. If we're talking about being developers of AI and not consumers, how would these small to medium enterprises access funds? If you go to a bank and say, I want to build a house, they'll give you a loan. Most banks will not give you a loan because they don't understand what AI is, or what you're trying to do when you put together perhaps your proposal around your SME and developing that. So having some thoughts around how do we find, not just locally, but also access funds for us to catalyze the growth of all our AI developers. And then finally, AI is a global issue. It's a social political issue. It's an economic issue. So as we're thinking about developing frameworks, ensuring that we are also thinking about and uniformity with global AI governance standards and principles. Thank you. Thank you, Ottilia. Please. So really quickly, I'll run through why we decided on, and so on the basis of all of those, which is building that AI ecosystem before we jump into developing any sort of, let's say, policies and or legislative instruments. These are the reasons why we decided on a national AI strategy as a starting point. And I think that, as I said earlier, these are the reasons that Rwanda and other countries looked at in it, firstly beginning with a national AI strategy. So a strategy serves as a dynamic long-term roadmap. So it defines where we wanted to go as a country in terms of the economy, society, and governance. And of course, unlike policies and other frameworks, which focus on regulatory compliance, the strategies provided direction and ambition. As I said, we have got very low AI readiness. And so providing that direction in terms of where do we want to go to catalyze that is very important. And a strategy does that. It is an inspirational and or aspirational framework. Flexibility, that's another key point as to why we chose an AI strategy. AI is evolving faster than traditional legal or policy cycles. That's the norm with most new technologies. And so the strategy allows us for experimentation, adaptation, and learning by doing, which is very, very important. Stakeholder buy-in drives legitimacy and success. That's another key point. So unlike top-down policy documents, which are often developed through strategies are often developed through participatory processes by engaging diverse stakeholders. So as I mentioned to you, I was a part of the team that was involved in the working group that developed it, but I was amongst a whole cohort of various individuals from civil society, academia, public sector, private sector. And so there was a huge cohort, and it was a very, very inclusive process, and including people from different sectors. So that allowed us to frame a picture of what Kenya wants in the different sectors and across the board. And then the last point is to why a national strategy, alignment with broader national and continental agendas. So a well-crafted strategy aligns AI development with national priorities. So we looked at all our national policies and also continental policies. It emphasizes local innovation, which is extremely important. Our Kenya's AI strategy really has a focus on local first, context-specific use cases. So we're looking at use cases by Kenyans, for Kenyans, or by Africans, for Africans, and indigenous languages, which is, I think you all know that is really, really important. Most of these AI applications are obviously driven, and prompts are using different languages from ours. And in order to ensure complete inclusivity, we needed to think about, well, how do we also catalyze the use of our indigenous languages, and that to ensure that the AI reflects our realities, unlike a lot of the imported models that we're using. Thank you, Atilia. So really quickly, as I said, so the strategy is called the Kenya National AI Strategy 2025 to 2030, 5 years, because it's a living document. Of course, it will be modified as it goes along. As we said, it's a national roadmap, focuses on AI research, development, and deployment tailored to local needs. As I said, it's local first, and driving sustainable development, economic growth, and social inclusion. It serves as an indicator of how a lot of African governments are beginning to approach AI governance, responsible innovation, national data ecosystems, and oversight grounded in ethical principles and human rights. Thank you. So, as I said, it touches on very many aspects because of the audience here, most of us being lawyers and policy professionals. I thought I'd just pick out the section of it that deals with governance and regulation, and just highlight some of the key principles that it outlines. So the strategy lays out the foundation for adaptive regulatory frameworks. So agility and flexibility, as you said, with a nascent and novel technology, is extremely important. So establishing flexible regulatory frameworks that balance innovation and safety, national standards and ethics. So developing standards and ethical guidelines for AI, and I'll, in the next slide, speak on one that's currently actually being developed. So that's to ensure that the technologies are developed and deployed responsibly. Engaging stakeholders, I've spoken about that, and that whole process of developing the strategy actually was a really good starting point to reiterate this particular foundation that it's looking at. So engaging civil society, academia, and what have you, in all aspects of policy making. So if we move next into a policy, which is likely the next trajectory into an AI policy, and if finally into an AI legislation, public participation is ingrained in that process. And then, of course, transparency and accountability. Prioritizing transparency, accountability, and risk prevention is key to responsible AI development and deployment. Thank you, Atilia. So I also thought I'll touch on some other regulatory frameworks that are in the works. So the strategy has been launched. It's the only current framework that's in place at the moment. But the Kenya Bureau of Standards is actually developing an AI technical standard for developers. I know there was public participation a few weeks ago, so that's for the people, and I think Akuya mentioned that, figuring out who is responsible, what is the responsibility for the developers that are actually creating these AI applications, what guidelines do they follow? So that's that Kenya Bureau of Standards has developed a guideline in that space. There's an AI statement of principles for Kenya that's also being developed and also going through a public participation process. And that generally just outlines the core values and principles that Kenya will subscribe to. Interestingly also, and this has been in place since last year, our Communications Authority developed a regulatory sandbox for emerging technologies. So you're allowed, any developers, companies are allowed to go there with their emerging technology, test it in that context, have multiple regulators come and look at it to try and identify perhaps a policy intervention point that they can think about. So that's an extremely useful tool. And I think this is one of the first few sandboxes in emerging technologies that's happening. And then in future, we're also looking at the development of an AI Safety Institute. So on to the last slide. And I thought I'd end with this, and it's a good segue to what my colleague Akuya will be doing. I mentioned earlier, and I've just been speaking about what Kenya is doing as a country, or what Rwanda's done with its AI strategy and what have you. But it's important to emphasize that AI is a global conversation. It's a whole of society conversation. It's a geopolitical conversation. It's a socio-economic conversation. So it's important that we don't just participate in the local context in developing these frameworks. It's important that we also have a voice in a lot of the conversations that are going, so that Africa has a voice in those conversations and isn't left behind. I've listed there some of the different both frameworks and conversations that are going on. Kenya has made it one of its key foundational principles to have a voice in those particular conversations. In fact, Kenya has got the first, I believe, tech ambassador. So we have an ambassador called Mr. Philip Tigo that is actually outward facing and goes and represents Kenya and Africa in a lot of these conversations so that we have a voice in these conversations. So we are guided by this. So even in developing our standards, as I mentioned earlier, the AI strategy, we looked at a lot of these frameworks. It is highly important that we have not only access, but our voice in these conversations and consider them when we are developing our local frameworks. In the interest of time, I will stop there and hand over to my colleague, Akua. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you, Otilia, for being the one who supports us with the slides. I would be grateful if you continue to do so. So my name is Akua Jechi. I'm the Director for Government Affairs covering Africa. I want to sort of supplement the work and the conversations that have been had so far and tell you a little bit about how we're thinking about AI policy and regulation from a Pan-African perspective. And you might ask yourself, why is that important? Hello?
Sorry.
You might have seen, I know if you can go back to the previous slide, please. You might have read articles about the economic opportunity about Africa. And even though the figures might be slightly different, what we do know is that the economic potential for AI is going to be massive. Some of the figures we've heard that by 2030, AI could add 3 trillion with a T US dollars to Africa's GDP. That's a reason why we should care about this topic and be involved in terms of how do we potentially enable some of that opportunity. Secondly, I think it's important to talk about the fact of we're in a very unique position. We have a massive population that is under the age of 30. Some figures say it's around 70% of our population across the board. That is useful and important for us to think about because we don't want to just talk about AI. We also want to talk about the fact that we need to have the right frameworks in place in order to have that youth be able to realize it and utilize the technology. And we know that without the right policies in place, policies that reflect our values, that are homegrown, that are inclusive, and that are ethical, it's not going to work the way that we want it to work for our continent. Next slide, please. Now, when we're thinking about governing AI, we at Microsoft actually drafted a blueprint of the sorts. It's not for us to tell other people how to write their laws, but knowing as we're the ones who know the technology well, we figured why not develop a blueprint that help guide in the AI development and the development of policies more specifically. And the Microsoft governance model that we've put out into publication, and we very much sort of want to make sure that you know that it's there for your usage. It's basically a 5-point blueprint that speaks to how can we enable the risks that come with AI? How do we promote transparency so people actually understand what kind of technology they're using and how they're using it? How do we ensure that there's human oversight when it comes to more critical infrastructure, human oversight when and where it makes sense? And how do we encourage public-private collaboration? Because in the end, this is a new future. Nobody has all the answers. And we really need to work together in order to figure out how can we come up with AI strategies and policies and frameworks that make sense for our context. Next slide, please. So I quickly want to walk you through our 5-point blueprint. The idea really is, number one, there's no use for starting from scratch when you think about legislation or policies when it comes to AI. A lot of governments have already developed safety frameworks or data protection frameworks in often cases that work and that at times even potentially cover or partially cover AI. So the keys really don't start from scratch, utilize legislation that is already in place and see how you can adapt it without reinventing the wheel. Second thing is you can think about, oh no, please go back to,
Yeah.
thank you. The second thing is about how do we think about safety breaks when it comes to high-risk systems. When I talk about high-risk systems, what I oftentimes like to think about is critical infrastructure. So think about your healthcare systems, your hospital records, maybe your energy supply. These are critical infrastructures that if they break down, our society breaks down. I think we still want to utilize AI potentially in those sectors, but how do we ensure human oversights that if something does go wrong, you have the overview and the ability to intervene before things sort of go out of hand? Thirdly, it's key that we need to understand that AI is complex and the law needs to speak to that. Oftentimes people speak about the tech architecture behind AI. And the idea really there is we don't only want to think about the applications, we also need to think about the people who build the infrastructure that underlies the applications or the technology itself. So thinking about responsibility for different actors in this space is really important when you think about the laws that should govern the overall AI infrastructure. Fourth and fifth point is it's important that we promote transparency. And you might ask yourself, why? Why should we care about being transparent about the technology that we're using? Without transparency, there's no trust. And if there's no trust, people don't feel comfortable using technology. So we as Microsoft have made a commitment to share on an annual basis our transparency reports, to share more about the type of technology that we're using and deploying and how we're going about doing it. But we also realize that we have to open up our doors to make the AI technology more accessible to academia or some of our partners to understand what is the technology about, what can it do, what can it do, how are we doing red teaming exercises, for example, to imagine the worst and then work backwards from there to make sure that there are guardrails in place for that. And as I'd mentioned before, we can't do this alone. This technology is so vastly improving and evolving so quickly that it really takes all of us to think through how do we make sure we can use this technology for our societal needs, and how do we build those guardrails or laws or frameworks so that it works for our specific contexts. Next slide, please. So if you want to learn a little bit more about sort of this 5-point blueprint, but also, and I think this is really helpful, some of the use cases that we found across Africa, how AI is already being utilized. Very much recommend this AI in Africa Meeting the Opportunity paper we put together. At the end of the presentation, Veronica is going to show a slide that has all of the resources and links for it. It really goes a little bit more into explaining what AI is about, what do we do to democratize access, what are the legal and regulatory blueprints that I spoke to earlier to make it work when it comes to AI governance, and what's our responsible AI approach that my colleague Otilia spoke to earlier. So I highly recommend it. That's something to look forward to. Next slide, please. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what's happening on an African level, African context. Because oftentimes we think about our own countries, where do we stand when it comes to policies or frameworks, but it's really important to also be aware of what's happening Pan-Africa-wise. So the African Union actually, last year in July, came up with a continental AI strategy. And it really sort of put a blueprint in place and sort of said, what do we want to use AI for? How do we promote ethical and responsible usage? And how do we encourage member states to develop their own national AI strategies and align with this broader overall goal? We do know that certain countries are sort of ahead of the curve when it comes to AI strategies. My colleague Malcolm talked about Kenya, but we also recognize other countries who are already doing this work. But I think the key point to take away from all of these great developments that are taking place is that in the end, we need to figure out how do we want AI to be utilized across our continent so that there's some sort of regional alignment and for us to really be able to benefit from the AI as one. I think it was mentioned earlier as well. The truth still is that as a continent, we are a bit behind when it comes to AI adoption and readiness. And it's not something to sort of worry about if we act now. We need to think about the policies. We need to think about the technologies, data and infrastructure, some of the key ingredients. And the good news is people are already doing some of this fantastic work. Next slide, please. So giving you a brief overview of the AI Continental Strategy, it applies to all of the 55 member states of the African Union, and it really is there to sort of position Africa as a global leader in terms of inclusive and responsible AI. It speaks to 5 priorities, really. How do we build capacity? How do we attract investment? How do we minimize risks and boost cooperation? And how, most importantly, do we make sure AI actually benefits the people? Next slide, please. It also talks about how do we keep AI accountable? What's the sort of shared responsibility we have that speaks to the people who develop the AI technology, the people who deploy it, and the people who use it when it comes to risks and mitigating those risks. So it's actually quite thoughtful in its approach, because the idea is that we do want to think about the benefits, but we also want to anticipate and mitigate the risks. And the strategy does exactly that. And then it talks about turning policy into action. You know that there are many laws on the books that nobody really knows how to enforce. They don't really know what they mean in practice. So one of the key aspects of the AI Continental Strategy focuses on how can we empower national entities like data protection authorities, cybersecurity agencies, to know how to utilize this AI moment and then also be able to enforce those laws and policies that we're in the process of developing. And how do we do so in a way that's harmonized across the region so that cross-border data flow can happen and we can actually take advantage of this AI inflection point. I also wanted to tell you a little bit about what has been happening in this overall AI space, because there are a lot of things going on. Every time you open the news, if you're like me and you're an AI geek, you'll come across some sort of story that is interesting about AI governance, what's going on. Something I wanted to highlight for this particular audience, being that many of you are legal or policy professionals, is that last year in October, a Pan-African group of experts came together in Kigali, Rwanda, to sort of think about, from an African perspective, what are our unique legal, cultural, developmental issues that we need to take into account, and how can we build a roadmap forward? For legal professionals, the recommendation really was, we have sort of an urgency to be involved in some of the legal reform initiatives that are taking place. And as to how I spoke about it earlier, our role can really be about how do we amend the already existing laws that are on the books, be that about IP, cybersecurity, human rights, and then make sure that they're updated to reflect the unique risks and opportunities when it comes to AI. Secondly, how can we be the champions for inclusive lawmaking? We all know that if there are more and diverse rooms and voices in the room, the resulting laws are going to be a lot more helpful and beneficial in terms of ensuring equity and representation of all the different voices that make up our societies. Kenya, the example my colleague spoke to earlier, was a fantastic example of making sure that you had different sectors of society, different sectors of industry, academia, civil society involved in a multi-layered strategy development plan that really made sure that different aspects of how AI could be utilized and should be utilized were taken into account. And this is something that we as legal professionals can definitely play a role in. And how do we make sure that these laws actually can then be enforced? We need clear legal obligations in regards to the different people who are playing a role, especially in the context where AI is deployed for critical infrastructure. Briefly also to mention is the point I mentioned earlier about the importance about legal harmonization. It is great that different people, different countries are advancing and thinking about AI for their own unique needs. But in the end, if we want to realize the potential across the continent, we know that data doesn't stop at borders. We need to think about how do we prevent fragmentation? How do we enable cross-border data flow in a secure way that enables for us to really take advantage of the AI in a way that we want to? And then what I've also heard a lot about is we want to make sure that our voice is heard not only in Africa, but also on the international level when it comes to discussions that are being held currently about how does AI regulation happen in the UN forums, the UNESCOs of the world, the OECDs. We want to make sure that our realities and interests are represented on a global scale. Very briefly, before I hand over to my colleague, Veronica, I wanted to say that some of the discussions that were held in Kigali in October actually kind of influenced and helped shape the very recent AI summit that took place in Kigali. It was a global AI summit on Africa. And the idea really was, how do we come together and discuss, okay, what do we need in order to get there? It's great that we're aligned. It's great that we have policies and even now a strategy. But in the end, we need to put these words into action. And the other important thing that this convening discussed is how do we make sure that Africa has an ambition to be an active player in the AI revolution, not just as a consumer, but as a contributor. We had about 2,000 delegates from 97 countries represented, and the theme was AI and Africa's demographic dividend. We contributed as Microsoft, as well as many other companies, to really think about what are the next steps in this global AI conversation. Next slide, please. And I'm really happy to say that this actually was a convening that didn't just stop with talking about it. There was a high focus on doing and figuring out what we will do next. So one of the outcomes was that was an AI declaration, the first ever declaration in Africa focused on AI. It very much built on the continental AI strategy, but you see here, there were some concrete commitments that countries agreed to, which is to reinforce and reiterate on the importance of data sovereignty. Africa wants to have control over its data, and that's a foundational aspect of the way it thinks about it. There was the announcement of an AI fund. They're going to sort of look to raise $60 billion to fund AI innovation in Africa. There was also a launch of an Africa AI Council, and that speaks to the harmonization efforts I spoke about to sort of make sure we were driving this digital transformation agenda together. And given the youth population that basically every country is thinking about, there was a high focus on talent development. How to make sure people have the skills, they can upskill, reskill themselves to really take advantage and become an AI workforce, not only for Africa and for the world. And how do we also make sure we have the compute infrastructure in place that supports all of that? We need high-speed internet in order to make AI applications work in the way we want them to do the research and solve African problems and find African solutions for them in the way we want to. So my last slide as I conclude, I want to again almost have a call to action / a bit of a ask for you who are legal professionals in the room. If you're thinking about how you want to get involved in this area of AI, why should you care? What can you do? I want to put this to you where I think we are actually quite uniquely positioned as we can operate at this intersection of law, of governance, and technology at this time. I think we also have a responsibility as these AI systems are being developed and deployed. We can help make sure that they're being shaped and deployed in a way that makes sense for our contexts, that they're inclusive of our needs and reflect our realities. And we can help figure out how do we become ready and bridge the gap between which bridge the gap between what we need in terms of innovation and the technology that helps to enable that, as well as the law that help govern in that respect. So thank you so much for your attention. I'm happy to hand over to my colleague, Veronica, who's going to share a little bit information about how she uses Copilot and other AI in her daily work as a legal professional.
Hi, thank you, Queer, and thank you, Tia, for sharing the slides. I will be taking you through how I, as a legal professional, leverage AI in my day-to-day tasks. And I understand that in all legal departments, workload is becoming, like the work volume is increasing, and not only in volume, but also in complexity. And you'd find that someone who used to work maybe in an IP department in a law firm now has to deal with data protection, AI laws, and also laws on cybersecurity. And AI is here with us, and I know most of us, if not all, are leveraging AI to actually, make our work way easy and to make ourselves more efficient. So, and here at Microsoft, we are leveraging AI every day in all our legal departments to actually make our work efficient. So, I will take you through how I leverage AI in my day-to-day life, starting from when I first enter into the office to my 5 p.m. So at 8 a.m. when I clock in, I usually go through my emails and basically just prompt the prompt AI to give me a summary of all the unopened emails, and that those emails that are specifically addressed to me. So I prompt again Copilot to basically give me a high level summary of what the email is talking about, and then just again seek guidance on how I should action them. And then from 9 a.m. I get to log into my calls with my managers, where I leverage AI. I just turn on Copilot. If you have used Teams before, you know that there is a provision for Copilot there. So when you turn it on, it can summarize all the meeting notes and what everyone has said, and even give you like a follow-up tasks. So I turn that on, and that helps me to actually concentrate during my meetings, just keep focus, and then at the end of the meeting get to maybe send someone the AI summary of the meeting. And if I need to come up with the minutes of the meeting, it's just way easier. Go like copy and format it and then send it out. And then from 11 p.m. when we are having planned presentations on how Microsoft, is committed to ensuring that we develop AI responsibly, our commitments to our customers, about their data, that okay, their data is safe. I get to generate slides on the PowerPoint app, where I basically prompt Copilot to create 4 slides summarizing Microsoft's AI commitments and measures put in place to protect customer data. Now, Copilot has a provision where you can attach a document. Let's say, for example, we have a Microsoft AI standard, and Ottilie has just talked about it. So when you upload the attachment, it just gets to summarize the high level details that are in the document, and you get to generate your slides very easily. And then at 11 a.m. I get to do my work. Let's say, for example, a new law has come out, and we want to see how this particular law is affecting Microsoft as a company here in Kenya or maybe in Africa. I get to just attach, I copy paste the specific provision that I want, put it on the Word document, and get to prompt Copilot on the Word document about, what does this particular law says, what are the implications on Microsoft. And then I get to use Copilot in Outlook to basically action all my emails, basically. Like if I have to action an email, I I basically write a draft of the email that I want to send, and then there are usually provisions, and I will show you later in the live demo how I can use it to fix my grammar, to change the tone of the email, to just, it makes your work easier. And you can even ask it to reply the email even before you put in your draft. So it makes my work way more efficient as someone who has to, send out so many emails and also get to read emails and respond to them. This has really made my work very easy and made myself way more efficient. And then when it comes to the Copilot chat, I use it every day. So if I want any document from the organization, I get to prompt it like, "Hi Copilot, there's this document. It was maybe drafted by this department. Can you please, can I see it? Can you?" And it gives you the document, even the web documents in the web. You just need to prompt it and it will do that work for you. And then when it comes, can you please to go to the next slide? So when it comes to using AI, it needs skills. You actually need to develop these skills, and they just don't come. They come over time, and you have to be very intentional with them. And the kind of prompt that you put, it will determine the kind of output you get, what the level, the quality of the output you get. So it's very good to structure your prompts like in the 4 prompt, as you can see in the screens. You have to make sure that there's a specific goal, draft this, summarize this, and then give it a context. Maybe let's say, for example, copy the attached document, copy the example, copy that format so that it can give you your desired results. And then you set the expectations. Sometimes you want something that maybe is in a professional tone, or maybe just like a LinkedIn post, like a step-by-step. You can say, give me in a paragraph form, or maybe in a bullet point form, and it will give you that. And you have to specify. And then the source, you have to give it something to work with. And that involves like attaching a document. And I will show you later in my demo how, you can just attach a document and get Copilot to actually, or any AI tool that you're using to get insights from that specific document. Can you move on to the next slide, please? And then here we have several ways in how you can prompt Copilot on different apps. So we have Copilot in Word document, in Teams, in PowerPoint, in Outlook. And some of these prompts I have mentioned them, like, can you please analyze a contract on what document? Or if you're in Teams, just recapping the meetings and using the AI summary. And then on PowerPoint, just creating slides depending on what kind of presentation you want out of that. So you'll have to go through that. And then I will take you through the live demo. Please
stop sharing so you can.
Yes. So I had prepared a few prompts just to save time. So let's say, for example, here, as you can see, let me just copy this. Oh, no. Let me share my screen. I hope you can now see my screen. So I had come up with a few prompts on how we can go about it. And this is just basically a prompt. A client has asked you about like a legal opinion on AI, basically, and how it can affect his business in Kenya. And as you know, AI is revolutionizing every business. People are so excited, and companies are so excited to actually incorporate AI in their business, and they want to understand what are the legal implications. And they hear that Kenya has just recently launched an AI strategy. So they would want to know what this strategy is talking about, what are the implications on their business. So if you just want to give your client a legal opinion. It's so simple. So my prompt is ready. I'll just come here and do a new chart and then get to upload the specific strategy. As you can see, the strategy is there. So I just upload it and then put in my prompt. Just wait for the document to load first. And then just wait for some minutes for your content to be generated. So here you go. And basically, Copilot is a copilot. Like, it just helps you to like lay an overview of what you're supposed to do. So as you can see here, you can start with the introduction of the legal opinion as to the AI strategy. And as you can see here, the Copilot has given you the components of the strategy, the strategic pillars, the crossing cutting enablers, the implications, and all that. And you can get to actually work from this, like just expound to make your work more perfect from this. And then going to the second prompt. So basically, I can just take this prompt and go to my Teams chat. So basically, I had a meeting with Ottilia this morning, and we were talking about a memorandum of understanding. And as you can see here, the Copilot has given us an AI summary, the one I was talking about. And at the end of the call, it gets to give you the summary. You can see how many times you are mentioned in the meeting, and even you can get the transcript of the meeting, like what Ottilia said in per second, per the hour. So it actually makes your work way more easier. And when you want to maybe draft an email pertaining to this particular meeting, you just come here to Copilot and then prompt it. So as you can see, my prompt says, can you draft an email to Ottilia summarizing action items from the call, and that I'm looking forward to following up on them during our discussion next Wednesday. So as you can see, I've prompted my Copilot on Teams, and it can just generate that email for you. So as you can see, it makes your live work way more easier. And yeah, and what you have to do is, and what is usually recommended is always co-check, like always make sure that the contents are right. I mean, this is AI, and it does make mistakes. So it's usually very advisable to go through word for word, sentence for sentence, to just make sure that your message is on point. And then on my last demo, I just basically see how Copilot works on the email. So again, I had come up with a prompt there, and I wanted to send Ottilia an email. So I'll just put in my prompt. I'll be like, hi, I hope you're well. I would like to follow up on the details of the MOU, and I'm to draft. Can you provide more context? Can I schedule a meeting to expound on this? So what you can do to actually make this email way better, you can just copy it, select it, and then get to see several options. Do you want to make it shorter? Do you want to make it longer? Do you want to change the tone? Let's see if we change the tone. So I want to change the tone to formal. As you can see here, AI has already drafted it for you, and it's way more formal. And before you even get to send out this email, you have to proofread it again so that you can just make sure it has captured all your message, like what the message that you're trying to pass across, and then you get to replace it and then send it. So that was the live demo, and there's so many ways in which you can, leverage AI in these tools, in these apps. I would encourage everyone to utilize the links on the presentation, of which we'll get to share. If you can see my screen. If you can see my screen, these are the resources. This is the document, the prompt engineering for lawyers. I highly encourage every lawyer who uses AI to actually go and see what it has in terms of like just prompting. So coming to my last slide. I don't know, it's taking time to open, but yeah. So again, when we are using AI, we have to be very mindful in how we use it. We have to remember that we are legal professionals at the end of the day. We have to be very professional with our work, with what you do. And I know most of us have heard of a lawyer who, and it was a senior lawyer who submitted a case law before the court, and it happened that that case law was generated by AI and it was not a real case law. So I would advise that if you're using AI to actually help you with your day-to-day tasks, get to proofread your content, get to check if you have asked it to give you particular sections in the law, go to that specific act or the regulation and make sure, okay, this is the right section, this is the right act, this is the right case law. Just make sure that your authority is actually real and not just AI generated. And then it is also important to disclose that, okay, maybe I've used AI to do this. Let's say, for example, we've had a meeting with you and you want to send the minutes to, you want to send me the minutes. It's usually very important to disclose that, okay, this is AI generated and it may actually not comprise of everything that was actually said in the meeting accurately. So it is important to always disclose that you've used AI. And also we have to consider confidentiality. As lawyers, confidentiality is the cornerstone of our professionalism. So it is always important to keep your client's information confidential. And it's actually always advised to get an AI tool that has given you the commitments, like, your data is protected, not just AI tools, because as we understand, most AI tools are out there to get your information and get to train that data. But when you're using an AI tool such as Microsoft Copilot, we assure you as our client that, okay, your data is protected, that we're not using your prompting data to actually train our AI tools. So it's actually very important to keep the ethics in mind when using AI.
Thank you for that, Veronica. Terry, that is the end of our presentation, at least from a Microsoft perspective. I just wanted to understand, you want us to move into the Q&A, or we move into the segment for LexisNexis and then do the Q&A at the end with the time that remains? Because I see there's as well some great questions that have already come in the chat.
Okay, thank you so much, the team from Microsoft. We have really benefited so much from dwelling very deeply into artificial intelligence, how it relates to us Africans, and most importantly, how we can move forward in terms of the framework in conjunction with governance and in consideration of how we're going to move, especially as practitioners of the law and also in the different sectors in our different governments and countries. So in our next segment, we're now going to listen to Jacqueline from LexisNexis. But Jacqueline will give you a very, very short time, about 5 to 10 minutes. In the interest of time, we need to finish this early so that we can have enough time for the Q&A, because we have a number of questions I can see in the chat. And afterwards, we can then close off the session. So Jacqueline, if you're ready with your presentation, we can just do it in less than 10 minutes, and then we can also move on to the Q&A so that people's questions are answered.
I'm going to share from.
Jacqueline, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Oh, yeah, there you are.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. So I the
Jacqueline, is that your network?
from
We can't hear you properly.
Lexis. Can you hear me now?
Jacqueline, your network seems to be a bit sketchy.
Can you hear me?
I don't know that it's mine or Jacqueline's, but your network seems a bit sketchy. We can't hear you. We can't see you proper. Okay, we can now start to see you a bit. Is there anywhere you can get stable network?
Okay, so I said, yeah, I'm going to switch that. I hope my network now is okay.
Yes, your network is a bit clear now.
Terry?
Yeah. Yes, you're now okay. Yes, you're now okay.
Okay.
Yes, you may proceed, Jacqueline.
Okay. So yes, so my name is Jacqueline. I'm the regional sales head in LexisNexis. From an AI perspective, we focus on legal research and we have developed an AI tool that supports legal research. So it's called Lexis Plus AI or Protege. Protege means it's like your assistant. It helps you in terms of doing AI. So key functions within our platform is one, it enables you to have conversational searches. So you can, just like how people use ChatGPT or how you can use Copilot, it enables you to have conversational searches. Our platform is purely on legal content, and it's based on legal content from a LexisNexis perspective. From LexisNexis, this cuts across our global database in whatever jurisdiction it is. Then secondly, the other function of the system, the platform is it enables you to summarize documents. So you can upload your cases, you can upload personal documentation, and it can be able to summarize it for you. You can upload the legislation, you can upload research notes, commentaries, and it will be able to enable you to summarize it enable you to summarize. Third, the other function is the other function is enabling you to draft documents, draft letters, draft emails, draft research notes, draft clauses within agreements. It can because it's tied to our research library, you can be able even to generate templates from the research library. Yes, templates from our library. And as you're doing the search functionality, it enables you to do citations in line with it cites the where the template has come from. It cites the law, jurisdiction, and etc. Lastly, you can compare documentation. If you have 2 or 3 documents or 2 or 3 acts, and you're trying to figure out what is different between the 2 acts, it enables you to give a summary of the acts. So that's a summary of my introduction to LexisNexis, AI, Lexis Plus AI. And yes, from a security perspective as well, just as Microsoft had presented, our data is secure, and it's not made public to everyone. So you can reach out to LexisNexis for more information and for a detailed presentation of the platform. I hope that helps. Yes. Terry, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Jacqueline. I'm always happy to know that there are new and emerging technologies that are happening not only in Uganda, but East Africa in general and in Africa. I think LexisNexis is a very impressive innovation, and I think that's something that we should all explore, whether we're lawyers, whether we're in governance. I think we should always be as innovative as possible to contribute to the global scale, especially in terms of artificial intelligence. Now we're opening up the stage for question and answer, which is a Q&A. I saw a number of questions that a number of individuals had, and I'm just trying to open up the Q&A now. So we have one. I don't know whether I should start from, let me start from up. So we have a gentleman. We have Yegon Emmanuel, who is asking, I don't know, I think one of the panelists will answer this, but he's asking, are there any alternatives to Copilot by Google for those who use Gmail? And I think he has a number of questions, but he was clustering all of them in two, three parts. So his first question is, are there any alternatives to Copilot by Google or for those who use Gmail? I don't know if any of the panelists can answer that. Maybe Olitalia? Otilia?
Yeah, I believe that Google has a Google AI option. I can't speak on their behalf on what their offering is, but definitely I think most of the big tech companies have a version of AI tool that's available. So you should be able to find a Google one, yeah.
Okay, his next question is Copiloting free? Is Copilot free?
No, it's a paid tool. So you'd be familiar with Microsoft 365, where you typically have there. I think Sheila has responded. There's Gemini for Google. Thank you, Sheila, for clarifying that. I'm not as familiar with their tools as I am with my home base.
His other question is, are there apps you can use in drafting court documents, pleadings, agreements, and doing research?
Yes, they are. So I think we've had, the sharing from LexisNexis. They have their tools that do those sorts of activities. You could also leverage some of the other generative AI tools like we spoke about from a Microsoft perspective, but maybe one of the leading ones we're hearing a lot of law firms adopting is Harvey AI. I'm not sure if you've heard about Harvey. Harvey has the cost, it's built by lawyers, so it's one of those for lawyers by lawyers type of tool. They have contract management there, they have research, they have although their legal research, I think currently mostly has European laws. I think they're still expanding their database. Then they have other operational legal ops a process as well that you can manage. So it's like a full service tools for the legal profession. And it seems to come highly recommended, Harvey AI. Yeah.
Okay, then his final question is, please comment on the artificial intelligence hallucination and the importance of cross-checking AI responses.
I think Veronica did a great, as in her last slide, really kind of spoke to this. So Veronica, I don't know if you want to take that and share a little bit of the thinking. I can support as needed.
Hello. So I would maybe ask just to come up again with the question.
Oh, the question was on hallucinations.
Can you please
The question was on
expound?
hallucinations. The question was, please comment on artificial intelligence hallucinations and the importance of cross-checking AI responses.
Oh, yeah. So basically, so you'd find that sometimes AI doesn't really give you whatever you want in terms of like results and expectations. So it's also very important to and if I've gotten your question correctly, like go through the outcome, like go through the results that AI has given you and see if that's what you want really. And it's also advisable like that if it's not what you want, you get to prompt it again so that you can get the desired results. And even after that, it is also always very important to cross-check. Let's say, for example, it has given you an authority, a case law, or an act of the section of the parliament. And as I explained earlier, it's always important to go to that specific act. First of all, check if it's there. Does it exist? And also check the specific section. Is it the correct section, so that before you submit your work, if you are submitting a pleading before the court of law, you just get to cross-check the authorities if they're correct. Because even the AI itself, like if you're using it, if you've used it on email before, on Outlook before, it will ask you like check for accuracy. AI itself will remind you to check for accuracy. So it's always very important to check for accuracy, read word for word, just to make sure that everything is in order before you send your document out.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Veronica. I think you've been able to throw some light on that. And actually, even me, I was looking forward to knowing the answer of that particular question. So we have another question from Sayi Kantai, and he's asking, he would like to know how AI and Copilot, specifically complainant with data protection laws in our jurisdiction. Are the details in the documents or other content I upload on the tool treated with the level of confidentiality that defines the lawyer's duty to the clients? I don't know if I've gotten the question, Veronica.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's directed to me as well. Okay.
Yeah, either Veronica or Ottilia can answer that.
I think maybe Malcolm can answer that.
Malcolm, will you be able to answer that?
So our products adhere to the laws in the specific countries. In terms of the Data Protection Act in Kenya, that is correct. That is something that is considered when we are taking data and the personal data that we are taking from our specific clients. Was he speaking specifically about how we handle the data?
Yes, it was in specific to, I think in specific to confidentiality, because he was asking, are the details in the documents or other content he uploads on the tools treated with the same level of confidentiality that defines the lawyer's duties to their clients? So I think he's trying to relate this to the lawyer's duties to confidentiality. So he's asking, if he uploads his documents, will AI treat his information with the same confidentiality as a natural lawyer would? Would AI and co-piloting do the same in terms of confidentiality?
So we would adhere to the broad laws. So we are talking about data privacy, data protection laws, certainly. So all our products adhere to the laws in whichever specific jurisdiction that we're in, and we adhere to those specific laws. So in terms of confidentiality to our client, if we're talking about the personal data that he provides, which is what's covered under those specific laws, so here we're talking data protection laws, we're talking IP laws, then correct. Under the specific jurisdictions, we would be following the laws of that given jurisdiction. Ottilia, is there anything else you'd want to add to that specifically? I think Ottilia's dropped off, but I think I've answered it broadly in that sense.
Okay, thank you so much, Malcolm, because actually that is something that a lot of people would want to know about. When personally, just to digress a bit, when I was launching my app, Farmeron here in Uganda, which connects people and lawyers together, many people raised that question because they wanted to know, if I'm contacting a lawyer on your app, is my information confidential? Is the lawyer bound by any form of confidentiality? And I had to also assure them that by our Advocates Act and regulations here in Uganda, definitely every lawyer is bound by law in terms of confidentiality. So I think that's what so many people would want to know about, whether they're using Microsoft or LexisNexis or any other platform which will have some sort of information that is shared in that particular respect. Thank you so much, Malcolm, for that. Then there's someone else asking, are the subscription costs of LexisNexis, what are they? What are the subscription costs? I think there we need to ask Jacqueline.
Yes, so we have a cost to the platform. The subscription cost is
Jacqueline, you seem to be breaking off.
we have to develop a quotation on case by case. We have just
Jacqueline, we couldn't hear you properly. Could you speak a bit clearly?
research platform that you're using. So
Jacqueline, we seem to have lost you.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, Jacqueline, we seem to have lost you.
I don't know what's wrong with my network.
Are you stable now? Jacqueline,
hello.
are you stable now?
Yes. I don't know why my network has an issue, but yes, our cost is it's a customized cost. Depends on the number of law firm accessing our platform, and we can discuss that offsite. Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm seeing a hand up among the participants. I'm seeing Mushabe Daffin. Daffin, are you on? Someone raised a hand. Daffin, are you up? We wanted to give you a chance to ask your question briefly. Okay, she doesn't seem like she's on. Okay, so we have another one from Ryan Kiruthu, who is asking that what can we expect from artificial intelligence and its developments, specifically integration with implementation of other fourth industrial revolution technologies, i.e. smart legal contracts in the legal tech sector. I think I'll give that to Akua. Akua, I think you could try to give us an answer on that. Akua, are you on?
Yeah, I'm on. I'm just trying to find the question again, if you give me a minute. So what can we expect from AI and its development, especially in regards to fourth industrial revolution? That's a really good question. Yeah, I think, let me think about that for a second. I think what can we expect? I think development of AI, particularly when we think about the fourth industrial revolution technologies, such as things like blockchain, the Internet of Things, cloud computing, I think they're going to really help us redefine how do we provide legal services? How do we provide access to justice? How do we change our regulatory frameworks? I think some of the things that come to mind is we're probably going to see more and more AI-enhanced smart contracts. We will probably see more automated, complex transactional logic, right? Maybe some contracts that will be able to self-execute when certain conditions are met. Maybe we can reduce delays in some of those commercial or financial contracts and transactions that we see today. I think Veronica, my colleague, said it well in that AI is really a co-pilot, someone who will help us assist with the work that we're doing it faster, doing it in a way that maybe avoids mistakes or flags risks to us and helps analyze certain issues. So I think from a legal professional standpoint, I think we will have to think about how we will change how we draft routine agreements. How do we think about adapting contracts and even evidence law to sort of think ahead when it comes to these new technologies. I also see AI being more and more used with predictive analytics. So we can envision a future where maybe certain judicial outcomes will be predicted based on historical data. That's oftentimes relevant for common law countries. So AI can look at a lot of data very quickly and see patterns and analyze patterns. So if it's a straightforward case, there might be a way that AI can help predict what the likely outcome might be of a case, and even help with just parsing through a lot of cases at a really fast time, right? Work that we, if you have worked in this sort of space, usually take a lot of time looking up on ourselves, doing the comparison. AI may be able to reduce some of that time. I think the other thing to think about is we're thinking about AI agents. You might have come across this. And in this context, I think it would be interesting for digital legal assistants, right? How can we have maybe virtual legal assistants? Some of them already exist that can help with things like routine things, client intake, some of the questions you need to ask in the beginning when you establish a relationship, legal FAQs. Sometimes you answer the same questions over and over again. How can some legal assistants can help with that? How do we summarize documents, help format them? Things that don't usually take creativity, but can take time. I think that's a good way of thinking about AI. How can it help reduce the time for some of these routine activities that we now have to do, but it would be nice if we could outsource them in order to work faster. So these are the sort of things, some of the things that come to mind when we think about the fourth industrial revolution innovations. I think it's key to say AI is never going to replace lawyers. I don't think so, but I think it will change the way we work. I think that's important for us to keep in mind as we think about how to upskill and reskill ourselves at this time.
Okay, thank you so much, Aku. I don't know that I had caught you when I asked the question. You gave a smile that showed me that okay, maybe this. I don't know that I caught you off guard, but that was a very brilliant answer. And I think just to add on to that, I think we should expect a lot of sensitization of the different people all over East Africa or in our individual African countries. Because so many people are used to the traditional way of doing things. A lawyer drafts for them a contract and the two parties come and sign together. They do manual signatures. But then I think with Industrial Revolution and with the taking over of artificial intelligence, I think we'll have things like electronic signatures, and we'll have to prepare the minds of the people, because as much as we're innovating all these brilliant and lovely technological solutions to make the law easier, the people who are absorbing this information need to be sensitized that, okay, nowadays there are electronic contracts, the electronic signatures. You may not even need to move out of your home to do or access certain legal work or services, and we might have to see people being more sensitized than us, the lawyers or the legal fraternity, whether it's East African Law Society or Microsoft or Uganda Law Society, whatever it is. We might have to sensitize the people more about the use of these technological solutions and how the people can move into them slowly by slowly. Yes. So the final question I have is, that's from Linda. Linda, I will not pronounce the other name because it's a bit complicated, but Linda is asking, hello, will the presentation slides and demos be shared with us via our emails? So I think that is to Gabriel. Gabriel, are you on?
Yes, Terry, I wish to confirm that the audio presentations and slides will be shared to every participant. Thank you.
Oh, brilliant. Yes, any other questions? If anyone else from the audience or participants has a question, please feel free to raise your hand and then we can answer your question. We We are almost at the top of the hour, and we just have about 3 to 2 minutes. Maybe just one person with one question, then we can wrap up.
There's a question in the Q&A that was just posted by an anonymous attendee that says in New York.
I'm not seeing anyone having any question. I think at this juncture we should close the webinar. I would love to give a vote of thanks, first of all, to East African Law Society. Gabriel, thank you so much for organizing this webinar. It's been a very lovely and interactive experience for me. And I think for everyone else, the participants and also the panelists, it has been a pleasure to speak to people from Microsoft. It has been an honor. You've been a very, very organized team. And I think really it goes without saying that you work for the biggest tech company in the entire world. So you've really surpassed my expectations. And thank you so much for this opportunity to moderate. I would really pray that we have more and more interactive sessions where we can discuss more developments in artificial intelligence and the law. And yes, I think let's reach for the stars. Thank you for all of this. And Gabriel, now I can pass it on to you.
Thank you, Terry. That was a very amazing session. There couldn't have been any other better moderator, if not yourself. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Secretariat and on behalf of my CEO, Mr. David Sigana, I would like to thank you all for making time to be part of this very interesting session. It's been captivating, it's been informative, it's been transforming. For the team from Microsoft, Utilia, Malcolm, Veronica, Aqua, thank you, thank you, thank you. We cannot thank you enough. We thank you for taking off time, prepare for this session, and the delivery couldn't have been any better. So thank you, Microsoft. And another special thank you to you, Jacqueline, from LexisNexis. Thank you so much for chiming into this conversation. I think this conversation continues forward, ladies and gentlemen. This session will not be the last of its kind. The East Africa Law Society is working out a partnership with Microsoft to deliver tailor-made courses such as these to enlighten you even more and more. So expect to have more and more and more of this in the forthcoming days. To you, our participants who have attended in your very large numbers as usual, we'd like to thank you for your continued support. All this is not possible without your continued support. So we thank you so much. And next week, we'll be having a very interesting discussion that is hosted by our Women Lawyers Committee, and you don't want to miss that very sweet discussion on planning and growth in your career. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, please, I would like to wish you all a very lovely afternoon and stay blessed until we meet again next week. Goodbye.